Good afternoon and welcome to UCEA Google Hangouts on Air. This is Angel Nash and I'm a graduate research assistant and doctoral student at the UCEA headquarters at the University of Virginia. I am here today to interview Dr. Mohammed Khalifa as a part of his candidacy for the UCEA Executive Committee. Today, listeners will be hearing from Dr. Mohammed Khalifa, who is an associate professor in the Department of Organizational Leadership, Policy, and Development at the University of Minnesota, Twin City. He has helped schools, districts, and departments of education address inequities in school. Having worked as a public school teacher and administrator in Detroit, Dr. Khalifa's research examines how urban school leaders enact culturally responsive leadership practices. Dr. Khalifa has recently published in the Teachers College Record, QSC, Urban Review, EAQ, the Journal of Negro Education, and the Journal of School Leadership. He is a co-editor of two widely sought books, Handbook on Urban Educational Leadership and Becoming Critical, the Emergence of Social Justice Scholars. His collective experiences allow him to help U.S. schools perform equity audits to address achievement gaps and discipline gaps in school. In addition to his urban work in the U.S., Dr. Khalifa has engaged in school leadership reform in African and Asian countries. Welcome, Dr. Khalifa. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for that intro.
My pleasure. Let's begin with the first question. Please tell us about your background and scholarship as it relates to leadership preparation and practice.
Absolutely. Well, my background is, as you noted, a public school teacher. I taught science on the east side of Detroit, and also as an administrator, I was a central district administrator. And so my parents were also educators. I was in public education for maybe around 10 years before shifting into higher ed. But that experience sort of shaped how I would then begin to interrogate and enter my scholarship. So I, like many of my colleagues in the field, I decided that from a very early moment I needed to interrogate critical frameworks, because for urban education we need a different set of lenses, I think, to some of the same typical problems that are recurrent. And so I I do community-based work. I try to just shift paradigms and shift the way that we look at some of the same questions that we've all been trying to answer, and administration and urban reform and systems and that sort of thing. Another thing that I may have a chance to talk about with some of the at a later part in this interview is sort of the technological advances that I've tried to push in the field as well. So I try to do equity work, but using technology so that it could be a lot cheaper and a lot more accessible, more frequently used by administrators in public education. So those are a couple of things that I bring to the profession. So.
Thank you. You have served for 3 years as a plenary session representative. Tell us about your engagement in UCEA's governance.
Well, in the governance, I have been, of course, a PSR, and in addition to that, and so that comes with just the normal duties that I think we're all aware of. But in addition, I was on the UCEA Executive Committee Election Review, the Barbara Jackson Committee for some years, the Award Selection Committee for Master. And so, every time I've been asked to serve in any of these roles, I was happy to do so.
Thank you. Will you discuss with us your scholarship, research projects, teaching, and/or service that can inform the work of UCEA, particularly the work of the Executive Committee?
Okay, absolutely. Before I get to that, there are a couple of other things that, a couple of other ways that I've been engaged with UCEA. And so, for example, I was the conference co-chair under the presidency of Mark Gooden. And also, of course, I've been involved in a number of mentoring sessions with graduate students, Clark Scholars, Barbara Jackson Scholars, and that sort of thing. But getting back to your next question about scholarship and research projects and teaching and service, well, my primary research area has been culturally responsive school leadership, and we mean a number of things by that, but primarily we argue that it's not just myself, but a number of other scholars in the field argue that it's probably one of the most understudied and under-theorized parts of school leadership. And so we kind of ask how leaders can remain critically self-reflective and how they can make sure that their entire school environments and the connections with the community are all culturally responsive and are sustained in culturally responsive ways as well, not just a one-shot deal. And so I teach theory courses, research classes, but unlike some of the other ones, I'm very comfortable teaching also practicum and principalship and more practical courses for those school leaders who are who are not planning to enter higher ed, but who are just planning, those students who are planning to just become school leaders at every level. And another thing I think that we at UCEA need to kind of be aware of is how we can do some of the same work that we do, but to utilize technology in more advanced ways, in more widespread ways, as opposed to having a technology committee that does technology work. I think that much of the work that many of us do, rather, can be really put at reach of administrators in ways that we had never thought of before. And so I'm happy to inform the executive committee in ways like that as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Will you share the reasons why you have chosen to run for the executive committee and your vision for the future of UCEA?
Yeah. Well, I'm just happy to serve. I think any of my colleagues who are also running for the executive committee would do just fine serving as well. So but I think what distinguishes me is that and I'll take this to whatever work I do, whether it's for my home institution or whether it's for UCEA, and that is how is it positioned to help marginalized people in communities? How is it positioned to help the most underrepresented and those communities that lack resources? So for me, it is about training the very best school leaders, making sure that we impart the skills to them, making sure that we're positioned so that we're not overtaken by some of these alternative programs. But at the same time, I don't think that we can stop there. I think that we really have to move much further and ask broader questions, such as how are we impacting the communities that our students will then go on to serve in? And so that's something that I think UCEA could do a better job at, and that's something that I'd like to propose to my colleagues that we take up as a focus in the next years coming around. And that doesn't only extend to, for example, urban communities or rural communities in the U.S., but also to global spaces that have been wrought by colonialism or post-colonial context and that sort of thing. So how do we train school leaders who will help humanity sort of progress? And I think that's the broader question that we always have to keep in mind. Otherwise, we can become very mired down in the test scores and all of these other kind of superficial measures that change from one generation to the next. So, yep, those are some of the things that's my vision, and those are some of the reasons that I've chosen to run.
Thank you. So you did mention the other ways that you have been engaged, and thank you for bringing that question to light. So I just wanted to give a time for you to answer that in its entirety, if there was anything you wanted to expound upon and ask it fully. And what other ways have you been engaged in UCEA?
Well, I thought it was one of the best conferences that UCEA had put on. I mean, all of them are absolutely great, but there was something very particularly, I think, magical about the conference that myself and Samantha and Tara, Dr. Chambers and Potters did that year as we worked with Mark Gooden. It was just, I think everything was just perfect. So I was happy to serve in that role. And I've been involved in a number of mentor one way or another for various mentoring, graduate student mentoring, early faculty, even though I consider myself somewhat as an early faculty person. I guess I am mid-career right now. But for faculty, I've been happy to serve as mentoring, just offer any kind of advice and my own experiences, sharing my own story along the way. So those are a couple of the ways that I have been more directly involved. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and thoughtful responses, Dr. Khalifa. This interview will be archived on the UCEA Google Plus page and the UCEA YouTube channel. Listeners can access or share the interview at any time. We also encourage listeners to post comments and questions on this interview in the comments section of the UCEA Google Plus page. Please stay tuned for our next UCEA Executive Community interview with Dr. Samantha Paredes Scribner on Thursday, October 22nd. Goodbye from UVA, Dr. Khalifa.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing you at the convention in San Diego.